Slightly controversial. There's Dan giving someone above Coltrane, but I think... Hi, welcome along to today's vlog. Today we're going to be talking about the Michael Brecker practice journals. Now, way back here, actually it was 6 years ago, on the 18th of October 2018, which seems an awful long time ago. Lots happened since then. When I was vlogging more regularly, hopefully I'm in focus. These are just a selection of the many practice journals that I have kept over the years. This popped up a few days ago, and it was an article about what's been put in by David Dempsey at William Paterson University in the United States. He has now got a living jazz archive, and one of the ones is of Michael Brecker. The goal of a triadic pair is to take two triads that don't share a note, so D major and C minor, and play those together. So now, in that episode, I spoke about how it was great to see the handwritten practice notes of, I think, the greatest virtuoso on the saxophone of all time, particularly the tenor saxophone. That's Mike Brecker. Slightly controversial. There's Dan giving someone above Coltrane, but I think Brecker technically was a better player than Coltrane. I think Brecker took the saxophone into new heights, particularly the tenor. But it gave us great insight into these handwritten practice notes of what Brecker was doing, and it's useful to us as saxophone players because here is the person who has reached, in a sense, the pinnacle of the technical proficiency on our instrument, or one of the people who've reached that, and it's great to try and find out how they did it. Now, we're not necessarily going to be able to do it. We haven't got necessarily the talent or the time in order to do that, but there's still things we can learn from it, and I'm really grateful that Chuck, I can't pronounce your surname, Chuck Scher, yeah. Now, whether he watched that vlog or what, Chuck Scher at Scher Music has actually taken the handwritten notes of Mike Brecker and turned them into a book, which you can now purchase and work your way through. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the exercises that are on that book today. Now, Brecker's work ethic was legendary. He was one of those people who practiced relentlessly, a little bit like Coltrane, had this ethic that I've got to practice, I've got to practice. I remember seeing a number of interviews with Brecker. There's the famous one in his basement studio where he talks about what he's working on right now, what he's practicing. And he often said, it will be 2/5s. One of the things that I really, really enjoyed and have found insightful is how he talks about, if he's got nothing else, no time to practice but do his 2/5s, that's what he prioritizes. And taking ideas and moving them into all 12 keys. I mean, that's been noted in a number of masterclasses. It's amazing, though, how often we hear that. It goes in this ear and goes straight out the other ear, and we go and buy everything that's all transposed into different keys. We mustn't do that. There's the element of working on things slowly, moving them into the different keys that really, really makes a difference when it comes to it being naturally there. One other observation from Brecker that I quote a lot to students is the fact that when he says he can work on something for 6 months, like a transcription or a particular exercise, moving it around in 12 keys, even 6 months to a year, really solidly practicing it, and it will never really come out on his gigs, or never did come out on his gigs, sadly, he's no longer with us. But it wouldn't come out until he'd forgotten it, not bother practicing it, and then his brain would somehow process it 6 months later in the middle of a solo, and he'd go, oh, that was that idea I was working on for a year ago. And I can relate a little bit to that. If I deliberately put something into a solo, it never normally sounds as good as when it organically comes out, and you can't force it. It just has to be there, it has to come through your practice. Now, I'm hoping I'll be able to get Chuck onto a coffee with Dan very, very soon. There's a number of books on Scher Music which are great. Chuck worked with Susan Brecker, Mike's widow, on getting permission to practice this, and not everything that was in the books that you can see in the handwritten that maybe I mentioned in that previous vlog has made it into this published book. He's slimmed it down, he's spoken to Brecker's bandmates about how was Mike practicing, what was he working on, what was he doing. Of course, transcriptions can't be moved over. Well, you have to get extra permission, extra money in order to get the publishing rights to move those over, so they haven't made it. But there are ideas that are in there, and I'm going to work on a couple of the ideas with you right now just to show you some of my favourites. But there are lots and lots of different ideas, and I would suggest that if you're serious about your practice, this is a book you should get hold of. You can get it digitally or you can get it in print. I'll post the link below, and this is something that any serious saxophone player should be spending some time on. That second triadic phrase is straight out of this fantastic book by Gary Campbell, which Mike Brecker was on record as using as a practice idea, which is Triadic Pairs for Jazz by Gary Campbell. Well worth it. And I'm just going to look at that exercise in 21 and kind of apply that Gary Campbell idea. So that's very much what we would term up and up where I come from, but you could go up and down. Which you hear on tons of Brecker solos, often played very quickly, quicker than I can play it right now. Gosh, my transposition isn't what it was. You know, moving those round. So that's a great one. He said here, 2 5s, use Lydian augmented on minor thirds, up from the root of the 5, okay? Come back to that one. I really also, I love this number 24, this 2/5 lick here. So what you might want to do is transpose that and work on that. Let's pull that up. There's the B minor 7, followed by a D minor 7. We'll deal with those last 3 notes later. So if I was to think of that in, you know, B minor followed by D minor, well, D minor is the third of the B minor. So I can take that down even in half steps. So if I go to B flat minor 7, and then the third is D flat or C sharp. Just getting an idea. Again, come from that Gary Campbell book idea. You can see how Brecker is synthesizing these ideas. The great thing for you to do is synthesize Brecker's ideas and other people's ideas and form them into your thing and onto your practice journal, which is what I was talking about in the last vlog. I spoke about this last lesson. I didn't show you this one. Here are my 2025 goals. Can I get, if I step out, will it? I'll post a picture on my Instagram anyway. But you know, here are I've set my goals, and then now oops, that's not what I want to show you. Then, you know, this is today's practice points. Tone match and overtones, scales and altissimo, practice ideas, and then transcribing Joel Fromm's Chelsea Bridge. I'm noting down what I'm doing because it's useful to see how things go. Journaling is really important when it comes to practice. I was a bit of a Brecker freak, particularly my first year in London. And then I kind of heard an interview with him and everyone was like, hey, you don't want to kind of sound like Mike Brecker because everybody else does. And I've kind of shied away from it a bit. And yet, I've got to admit, it's not my kind of, I can appreciate the virtuosity on it completely, but it's not what I'm listening to all the time. Doesn't diminish how great it is and doesn't diminish how much we can learn from it, and it doesn't diminish how much I used to be able to play skunk funk and now I can't. Now, a while ago, I'm thinking like years ago when I got my first studio in Bangor in Northern Ireland, my brother got me a very special print of Mike in action in Manchester in about 1992 actually, by I can't remember the photographer's name. I met him at Southport Jazz Festival. Anyway, this print's been sat in my utility room and it ought to be in my studio, so I'm going to go and put it up in my studio. And there you go, right next to my Altissimo crib sheet. Mike's picture is now up in the studio where it should have always been. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to Chuck and Susan Brecker for helping the rest of these ideas of Michael Brecker get out there, but most of all, thank you to Mike, not just for the practices, but for the amazing music. It's such a shame. I think it will be 18 years since Mike passed, I think tomorrow. So it's a sad thing and also a very happy thing that we had him for his music, and sadly no longer with us. One of my great regrets is I didn't get to meet Mike. I heard him play once in Manchester in 2001, I think, but didn't go backstage and meet him. I wish I had done. One of my regrets. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit a like, subscribe. See you next time.